The revolution of Iran represents an Islamic revolution, not an Iranian revolution. For Ayatollah Khomeini, it's very important. It's not a Shia revolution either. It's not a Sunni revolution. It's not a revolution for the Iranian civilization or the Iranian people. It was a revolution for him, which was based on these prophetic values, this prophetic dream, and reviving that prophetic dream in a world which was now lost and immersed in immorality, hedonism, secularism, naive stupidity, based on an imbalanced dream sold to them by the Americans, through the Americans, by the money mafias, that actually somehow money and material would solve their problems, when it hasn't.
Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
This is an interview with Ayatollah Khomeini shortly after the revolution, in the context of the Iran, the hostage, quote unquote, hostage situation of the embassy, where he talks a little bit about his worldview. And so I just want to quickly ask you about, like, what is the worldview, the world outlook of the Islamic Revolution, and what makes it different and important to defend, in particular when talking to people who consider themselves progressive or anti-imperialist. So I'm just going to play this and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
President Carter accuses your government of practicing terrorism and says that your regime will be held accountable if those U.S. hostages are harmed.
35 million people of Iran are terrorists? Ask Carter. You interpret politics like this? You call our people terrorists? I have heard what Carter says of them, and it doesn't make sense. He says they are not students, they are bums, mobs, they are terrorists. You know these as terrorists? This is an insult to students and people across the nation. You consider our people terrorists? You understand them of politics is that we are a nation of terrorists? We are Muslims. This is an insult.
Imam, President Sadat of Egypt, a devoutly religious man, a Muslim, says that what you are doing now is, quote, a disgrace to Islam. And he calls you, Imam, forgive me, his words, not mine, a lunatic. I know that you have heard that comment. That's what I heard President Sadat say on American television.
Yes.
That the Imam is a disgrace to Islam,
Yes.
and he used the word a lunatic.
Sadat
Sadat states he is a Muslim, and we are not. He is not, for he compromises with the enemies of Islam. Sadat has united with our enemies. Sadat knows well what is occurring south of Lebanon and with the Palestinians. He knows the crimes of Israel. Yet he still considers Begin a friend and himself a Muslim. You must try to evaluate what he is doing, then through Islam. The Egyptian people do not back Sadat.
Imam, is Iran in effect at war with the United States now?
حضرت امام آیا جناب عالی یا به طور کلی ایران در حال حاضر با امریکا در حال جنگ هستید؟
What do you mean by war? If you mean our armies against the United States armies, no, there is no such war. If you mean it is a battle of nerves, it is Carter's doing. We are against war. We are Muslims. We desire peace for all. Carter does not allow this. Carter should put aside his so-called humanism and return the criminal Shah so that we can conclude this matter.
Powerful stuff. I love hearing the great Ayatollah Khomeini and his calmness. He just brings me at a next level state of calm and peace. And like he said, Islam is a religion of peace. And it's just crazy because the Zionist media, they always portray Iran as violent, as wanting war and aggression. What country has Iran invaded, right? It's not Iran that invaded Libya. It's not Iran that invaded Grenada and all these different Iraq and Syria. You know, Iran is a nation, a civilization of thousands of years of history, and yet it maintains peaceful coexistence with its neighbors and peoples around the world, and is a voice for the poor and oppressed people around the world. And even though it has a lot of powerful capabilities militarily, economically, it doesn't exercise its power in a hegemonic way over the world. It promotes win-win cooperation, you know, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. Iran has played such a great role in helping the sanctioned countries, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, promoting development. Mohsin, what do you think about, what does Ayatollah Khomeini mean to you? What inspires you about the Islamic Revolution, and what are some of the values that are promoted that are important to defend, especially in 2022, with just a degraded capitalist, decaying mindset of, you know, postmodernism and all this stuff? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Ayatollah Khomeini represents a watershed for Islam. He represents a watershed for Muslims. He is the single force of nature which has essentially brought back Islam, the possibility of it actually enacting justice, a kind of civilizational justice based on divine and prophetic values. This is the key thing, because you see, in a world where people have been overrun by secular neoliberal values without even really realizing it, where they've been given sugar-coated pills of modernity, of progressiveness, of technology, of science, of all manner of things. All of it has been done with the seduction of materialism and a physical, a play on the weakness of human beings for, wanting physical pleasures and such things. Now, what the problem with that is that it doesn't take into account that kind of material ideology doesn't account for the spiritual, and it doesn't account for the heart either. Two things it fails. Yes, the body it focuses on, even that in a very superficial way, of the pleasures, but actually it doesn't deal with the soul. It doesn't deal with what people's hearts are about. Now, Ayatollah Khomeini represents a tradition which is going back to Jesus Christ, which goes back to Noah, which goes back to Abraham, which goes back to the prophetic virtue ethics and that tradition of wanting for human beings a balanced lifestyle, a kind of a prosperous lifestyle based on justice and fairness and equity, not equality, equity. There's a very important difference there, because you can't have equality. There's no such thing. It's an impossibility. 5 fingers are never going to be equal. In the same way, human beings are all created with different levels of, there are differences. There are just innate differences between men and women. There are differences between, various children at different levels, differences of intellect, differences of wealth, all sorts of differences. So there's one of the key tricks of modern secular materialism, hypermaterialism, has been to buy people into this idea of, first of all, seduction of the material only at the expense of the heart and the soul or the spirit. And they've also been able to convince people that actually, you know, they can be looked after by the state alone. So the attack which has taken place, which destroys prophetic ideals and the prophetic dream, is what Ayatollah Khomeini really stood for. In his own way, at that time, he was his movement was the premier movement which revived this idea around justice, a balanced equilibrium for humanity. And that equilibrium, of course, for him means balance, using the Holy Quran, using Islam. And the point about this balance is that it's interpreted by men. It has to be, but it has to be interpreted by men who have sincerity and who have wisdom and who have insight and who are also capable of understanding the unseen as well as the seen, the material and the immaterial. Ayatollah Khomeini comes from that tradition of urafa and irfan and scholasticism, which is the jurisprudence side of it. He comes from a knowledge. I mean, the man would have had something like 15 or 20 PhDs in the lifetime of studies. That's what Ayatollahs do. And the top Ayatollahs basically go through this rigorous training, both rational, about logic, about mantiq, and they're fully cognizant and exercising rationality. They're also taught metaphysics. They're taught about the unseen world and realities that we don't understand. All of this is rooted in the Holy Quran. And the revolution of Iran represents an Islamic revolution, not an Iranian revolution. For Ayatollah Khomeini, it's very important. It's not a Shia revolution either. It's not a Sunni revolution. It's not a revolution for the Iranian civilization or the Iranian people. It was a revolution for him, which was based on these prophetic values, this prophetic dream, and reviving that prophetic dream in a world which was now lost and immersed in immorality, hedonism, secularism, naive stupidity based on an imbalanced dream sold to them by the Americans, through the Americans, by the money mafias, that actually somehow money and material would solve their problems. But it hasn't. If we look at the American dream and look whether it's solved any of their real issues, divorce rates, I could quote any number of statistics and compare it even to Iran, and you will find divorce, you will find destruction of family, you will find mental health issues. Whether you want to ask me in terms of whether they can even define what a woman is now, the reality is where they've taken us is a state of confusion, chaos, and absolute imbalance with their secular neoliberalism. Yet they're insistent that not only have they inflicted the Western world with it and infected the Western world with it, taken God out of the equation, leaving behind a huge God-sized hole in the hearts, minds, and souls of human beings in the West, and they've not replaced it with anything. They've not given anything in replacement of God. They've said that the state would look after them. The reality, the state can't, and it doesn't. And what you've now got is multiple illnesses, but psychological illnesses, particularly emotional illnesses, destruction of the family unit. The fundamental thing which makes a society strong and what Islam pushes for is a really balanced family. So mother, father, children, focusing on that unit, giving them real wholesome, natural environments. You see, the left has missed the point on this particularly, and that's where when you talk about the left, they are particularly criminal in terms of destroying this, and they use equality. What I said at the beginning is the weapon of equality. That word equality is used to blind them. Let's talk about the word equity, and let's talk about equilibrium. Let's talk about balance. Let's talk about the nature of man. Where are the studies within all these fine researches that are done amongst, the Western universities? Where are the studies which get buried underground about the impact of LGBTism or the impact of feminism on society at the moment? Where are the studies on the impact of neoliberal hypermaterial attitudes? You see, those things get relegated away, and what you end up with is this kind of drum roll for the money mafia to sell, and they've turned us into what? Consumption and production units, because they only see us as the material. They don't care about our hearts. They don't care about our minds. They don't, our mental state. They don't care about our spiritual, soulful states. So therefore, they are inadequate in the solution they're giving as a civilizational, option for the future. Only Islam, actually, ultimately, which is a culmination and a combination of all the previous books, whether it's the Christian Zabur, or whether it's the Injil, or the Jewish Torah. Islam and the Quran, all they are is a reminder of that fitra, the human nature. And Ayatollah Khomeini, this is why I see him as so phenomenal in what he did, because his vision was not based on nationalism. You see, that's another ism that we've been thrown. It's another red herring. It's another division basis. Any kind of ism of that kind, racism, the ethnicity-ism, feminism, LGBT-ism, all these isms they create are designed primarily to divide us and to atomize our societies. Now, Islam is not about atomization. Islam is about collective moving together. It's about sharing. It's about giving. It's about generosity. It's about mercy. It's about love. But all of that has to be done, enshrined within the square of justice. Now, they won't talk to you about justice within the neoliberal circles, because they don't like that word. They'll talk about equality and they'll talk about all these other things. Try and talk to them about justice. They won't go there. Yep. So what is a just order? I want a conversation about justice, and this is what the Islamic Revolution is about. It wants a conversation in the world about what justice stands for. And in Iran, they're trying to create that justice system under duress. They've been sanctioned. And so that's not an excuse. There is still corruption. Yes, there's elements of corruption. And Ayatollah Raisi is one of those who's been rooting it out in his role as the head of the judiciary prior to becoming president. And there were a lot of people. Ultimately, human beings have bad habits and they want the material greed as well. Now, any system that is evolved will always have to deal with that. But Islam has a ready-made template, Ramiro, and this is what worries the Zionists. It worries the money mafia, because when you have a ready-made template that can come in and be put in, and if a just leader and a man with resources and finances gets hold of that vision, he will enact it, and he will destroy usury. He will destroy the atomization of the family. He will destroy the divisions that are created based on ethnicity and whatnot. He will create love, peace, order, prosperity, financial as well, material, but he will balance it with the spirit and the wider, context of Islam. So in the policies of education, we wouldn't have education systems which are just geared towards the corporate companies' interests. The children will be raised in a way which first and foremost is wholesome for them as human beings, as people who have agency and who are entitled to their rights in this world. You wouldn't have them doing jobs or gearing up for jobs which the corporate world of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and whatnot are creating for them. That's not who should be dictating what our children are about. Islam has to go this way. Agenda 2030 was rejected by Iran, and I think it's one of the greatest things that Ayatollah Khomeini has done in his time, that he stopped that invasion of this entire agenda, a very organized agenda for atomizing and destroying the whole of the world's kind of natural fitri inclination. Iran has a duty now and an obligation to carry that forward and to create a dream which is counter to the hyper-materialist, secular, Zionist, money mafia dream.